The dust-laden wind howled through the empty church as Nora Blackburn stared down at her trembling hands, tears streaming silently down her face, her wedding dress now seeming like a cruel joke as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows. The year was 1875, and in the small frontier town of Redemption Creek, Colorado Territory, a jilted bride was cause for whispers and sidelong glances that would follow her for years to come. Nora had waited for Walter Preston to appear at the altar for nearly 2 hours before accepting the truth that had been delivered by his frantic best man just minutes ago. Walter had fled town on the morning train, leaving only a hastily scribbled note explaining he'd gotten cold feet and couldn't go through with the wedding. The guests had shuffled out awkwardly, offering strained condolences or simply avoiding her gaze altogether. Even her own family had dispersed, her mother claiming the shame was too much to bear, her father following dutifully behind. Now only the elderly pastor remained, and even he was making motions to leave. "I'm sorry, Miss Blackburn, but I must lock up the church soon," he said gently. "Perhaps your maid can help you home." She left with the others, Nora whispered, her voice raw. Everyone did. The pastor's weathered face creased with sympathy. "I'd escort you myself, but my rheumatism." "It's all right," Nora said, rising on shaky legs. "I'll manage." The humiliation burned worse than the tears. 22 years old and publicly abandoned at the altar in a frontier town like Redemption Creek, where eligible women were scarce and good reputations precious. This was a disaster of immeasurable proportions. As the pastor shuffled toward the door, it suddenly swung open, framing a tall figure silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. Nora instinctively shrank back, unwilling to face another pitying stare. The man stepped inside, removing his worn leather hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. Dust covered his denim trousers and cotton shirt, and the spurs on his boots jingled softly as he moved. "Pardon the intrusion," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I was passing through and heard there was a wedding." His eyes took in the empty church, the scattered flower petals, and finally rested on Nora's tear-stained face. Understanding dawned in his expression. "Seems I was misinformed." "The wedding's off," the pastor explained, clearly relieved to have someone else present. "Mr. Preston, well, he didn't arrive." The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see." He turned his full attention to Nora. "Owen Bailey, madam." "I'd be honored to escort you home if you'd allow it." Nora stared at him, this stranger who had materialized when everyone else had vanished. His eyes, a warm amber color, held no pity, only a quiet respect that somehow made her straighten her shoulders. "Nora Blackburn," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Bailey, but I wouldn't want to trouble you." "No trouble at all," he said, taking a step closer. "A lady shouldn't walk alone, especially." He gestured vaguely at her wedding dress. Nora looked down at the cream-colored silk and lace that had cost her father 3 months' worth of store profits. The thought of parading through town in it, a visible reminder of her humiliation, made fresh tears threaten. Owen seemed to read her thoughts. "I've got my horse out front. We could take the back road to your home, avoid the main street altogether." The pastor cleared his throat. "Mr. Bailey seems a decent sort, Miss Blackburn. I'd rest easier knowing you weren't alone." Nora hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Bailey. My family's mercantile is on the east end of town. Blackburn's General Store, I know it," Owen said, offering his arm. "My horse, Rogue, is gentle enough with ladies." The pastor hurried ahead to check that the churchyard was empty, then motioned them forward. Owen led her to where a magnificent chestnut gelding stood patiently. With surprising grace for a man of his size, Owen helped Nora arrange her voluminous skirts so she could sit sideways on the saddle, then mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist. "Hold tight to the pommel," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. "I won't let you fall." As they rode through the back alleyways of Redemption Creek, Nora became acutely aware of the strong arm around her and the solid chest at her back. Owen Bailey smelled of leather horses, and the sage-scented prairie nothing like Walter's cologne and pomade. "May I ask what brings you to Redemption Creek, Mr. Bailey?" Nora asked, desperate to think about anything but her current circumstances. "Just passing through," he replied. "I've been working cattle drives between Texas and Montana for years, but I'm looking to settle somewhere. Heard there might be ranch work in these parts." "There's the rocking T spread about 10 miles west," Nora offered. "Mr. Thompson mentioned needing experienced hands." "I appreciate the tip." Owen guided the horse around a corner. "If you don't mind my asking, Miss Blackburn, where is your family today? Seems strange they'd leave you alone at a time like this." Nora swallowed hard. "My mother couldn't bear the shame. She's always been concerned with appearances." "My father, he follows her lead in most things." Owen made a sound deep in his throat that might have been disapproval. "Family should stand by you, especially when times get hard." "Do you have family, Mr. Bailey? Lost my parents to fever when I was 16. Been making my own way since then." There was no self-pity in his tone, just simple statement of fact. When they reached the back entrance of Blackburn's general store, Owen dismounted first, then reached up to help Nora down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and he set her on her feet with gentle care. "Thank you," she said, smoothing her dress nervously. "I'm in your debt, Mr. Bailey." "No debt between us," he replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Just glad I could help." Nora couldn't explain the sudden reluctance she felt to part ways with this stranger. "Would you like to come in for some coffee? It's the least I can offer." Owen glanced at the store, then back at her. "Another time, perhaps. I suspect you need some privacy now." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather-bound book. "Here. Sometimes reading helps take your mind off troubles." Nora accepted the book with surprise. "But this is yours. I've read it 3 times, he said with a slight smile. "It's just on loan, mind you." "Means you'll have to return it to me someday." "Walt Whitman," Nora read from the cover. "Leaves of Grass." "Poetry about the beauty of the simple things in life," Owen explained, mounting his horse again. "Might be worth remembering that today isn't your whole story, Miss Blackburn, just one page." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and turned his horse. "I'll call on you tomorrow if that's acceptable, just to make sure you're all right." "Yes," Nora found herself saying. "That would be acceptable." As promised, Owen Bailey appeared at the Mercantile the following afternoon. Nora had spent a restless night alternating between tears of humiliation and anger, finally falling asleep with Whitman's verses swimming through her mind. She'd risen early, put on her plainest work dress, and thrown herself into reorganizing inventory, ignoring her mother's dramatic sighs and her father's uncomfortable silence. When the bell above the door rang just after 2 o'clock, Nora looked up to find Owen standing in the entrance, hat in hand. He'd cleaned up considerably. His hair was neatly combed, his shirt fresh, and his face clean-shaven, revealing a strong jawline and the hint of a dimple in his right cheek. "Mr. Bailey," she greeted him, suddenly self-conscious of her plain attire and the dust smudge she was sure marked her cheek. "You kept your word." "Always do," he replied simply. "How are you faring today, Miss Blackburn?" Before she could answer, her mother emerged from the back room. Evelyn Blackburn assessed Owen with sharp eyes, taking in his well-worn but clean clothing and the calloused hands that marked him as a working man. "And who might this be, Nora?" her mother asked, voice cool and proper. "Mother, this is Mr. Owen Bailey. He was kind enough to escort me home yesterday when everyone else." Nora paused, pushing down the renewed sting of abandonment. "Mr. Bailey, my mother, Mrs. Evelyn Blackburn." "Madam," Owen nodded respectfully, "you have a fine establishment here." "Yes, well, my husband has worked very hard to build our business," Mrs. Blackburn replied, emphasizing the word husband slightly. "Are you new to Redemption Creek?" "Just passing through, madam, though I'm considering staying on if the right opportunity presents itself." Mrs. Blackburn's gaze sharpened. I see. And what line of work are you in, Mr. Bailey? Cattle, mostly. Been a trail boss for the last 5 years, bringing herds up from Texas. Before that, worked my way up from Wrangler. Something in Mrs. Blackburn's posture relaxed fractionally. A cowboy, even a trail boss, wasn't exactly high society, but it was respectable work for a man on the frontier. I came to see if Miss Blackburn might like to take a walk, Owen continued. Thought some fresh air might be welcome after yesterday's difficulties. Mrs. Blackburn's lips thinned. I hardly think it appropriate for Nora to be seen promenading about town so soon after such a scandal. Nora felt her cheeks burn. Mother, please. Actually, madam, Owen interjected smoothly, I thought we might walk along the creek path. It's quiet there this time of day, no prying eyes. Mrs. Blackburn seemed torn between wanting Nora out of sight and disapproving of her being alone with a strange man. Finally, she sighed. Very well, but be back before sundown, Nora, and stay on the public paths. Yes, mother, Nora replied, already reaching for her shawl. Outside, the May afternoon was pleasantly warm, the cottonwoods along the creek just beginning to release their fluffy seeds that drifted through the air like summer snow. Your mother is protective, Owen observed as they walked toward the creek path. She's worried about appearances, Nora corrected. Right now, I'm damaged goods in the marriage market. A jilted bride is just above a fallen woman in the social hierarchy of Redemption Creek. Owen frowned. That's nonsense. You didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. Walter left because he found someone more exciting, that's what his note said. Which means I wasn't enough. The admission hurt, even to a virtual stranger. If you don't mind my saying so, Miss Blackburn, that makes Walter Preston a fool, not you insufficient. Nora glanced at Owen, surprised by the conviction in his voice. You don't know me, Mr. Bailey. I might be terribly dull. Let's see, Owen mused, guiding her onto the shaded path that ran alongside the burbling creek. You work in your family's store, which means you're practical and good with figures. You read poetry, suggesting you appreciate beauty and reflection. And despite having your heart broken publicly yesterday, you're walking beside me today, which shows remarkable resilience. His assessment rendered Nora momentarily speechless. Finally, she managed, you're very observant, comes with the territory. On cattle drives, you learn to read people quickly. Your life sometimes depends on it. Is it dangerous work? Owen nodded. Can be. Stampedes, river crossings, rustlers, sometimes trouble with native tribes if you cross their lands without permission. Weather's often your worst enemy, though. Lightning can spook 2,000 head of cattle into a deadly stampede in seconds. How terrifying, Nora said, genuinely fascinated. I've never been farther than Denver. The trail has its hardships, but there's beauty too. Sunrises that turn the whole prairie gold. Stars so thick at night you'd swear you could scoop them up by the handful. Freedom to go where the work takes you. It sounds wonderful and lonely at once, Nora observed. Owen was quiet for a moment. It is that. Been thinking lately it might be time for something different. A man gets to a certain age and starts wanting roots. They reached a fallen log beside the creek, and Owen gestured for Nora to sit. The sound of water flowing over rocks filled the comfortable silence between them. I started reading your book last night, Nora finally said. The poetry is, unlike anything I've read before. Owen smiled, and the expression transformed his weathered face, making him appear younger. Whitman doesn't follow the rules. He celebrates the ordinary and finds wonder in it. Reminds me that there's glory in simple things, a blade of grass, a bird's song, the way light hits water. Nora studied him with new interest. You surprise me, Mr. Bailey. You don't seem like the typical cowboy. Maybe you haven't met enough cowboys, he suggested with a glint of humor in his eyes. Over the next 2 weeks, Owen became a regular visitor at Blackburn's general store. He'd found work at the Rocking T Ranch as a ranch foreman, a position that spoke to his experience and competence. Each day, he would stop by the mercantile on some pretext needing supplies, returning a borrowed book, delivering a message from ranchers to Nora's father. Nora found herself looking forward to these visits with increasing eagerness. Owen was different from any man she'd known, direct yet gentle, confident without arrogance, and possessed of a quiet intelligence that revealed itself in unexpected ways. He treated her with a respect that made Walter's attention seem shallow by comparison. The town gossips, of course, had noticed. Their whispers followed Nora's speculation about her rapid recovery from heartbreak, suspicions that perhaps there had been something between her and the handsome cowboy before Walter's abandonment. Nora tried to ignore the talk, but it stung nonetheless. "You shouldn't let them bother you," Owen told her one evening as they sat on the Blackburn's porch swing. Her parents, gradually warming to Owen's steady presence and impeccable manners, had begun allowing these supervised visits. "People will talk until something more interesting comes along." "That's easy for you to say," Nora sighed. "Men don't face the same scrutiny women do." "True enough," Owen acknowledged. "But consider this: in 6 months, will their opinions matter to you? A year from now, will you even remember who said what?" "I suppose not," Nora admitted. "But it's difficult being the subject of everyone's speculation." "Then give them something new to speculate about," Owen suggested, his eyes twinkling. "What do you mean?" "The Independence Day celebration is coming up. Let me escort you. We'll dance every dance, eat pie at the social, watch the fireworks together. Give them something real to talk about." Nora felt her heart quicken. "Are you asking to court me properly, Mr. Bailey?" "I believe I am, Miss Blackburn," he replied, his voice deepening. "If you'd allow it." The warmth in his gaze made her breath catch. "I would very much allow it." The 4th of July celebration transformed the main street of Redemption Creek into a festive wonderland of bunting, flags, and lanterns. Tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes. A makeshift dance floor had been constructed in front of the town hall, and children ran excitedly through the crowds with sparklers. Owen arrived at the Blackburn home precisely at noon, dressed in his best clothes: a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and new boots that Nora knew had cost him nearly a week's wages. The admiration in his eyes when he saw her in her blue calico dress made her previous insecurities melt away. "You're beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. Mrs. Blackburn, who had gradually warmed to Owen over the preceding weeks, actually smiled as she adjusted Nora's hat. "You both look very handsome. Now remember, home by 10, Nora." The celebration was in full swing when they arrived. Owen proudly introduced Nora to his fellow ranch hands, who treated her with exaggerated courtesy that made her laugh. They sampled Mrs. Peterson's famous apple pie, applauded the children's patriotic recitations, and when the fiddlers struck up a lively tune, Owen led Nora onto the dance floor. "I should warn you," he said as he took her waist, "I learned to dance in Texas cattle towns, might not be as refined as you're used to." "Walter stepped on my toes constantly," Nora confided. "The bar is quite low." Owen laughed, the sound rich and warm, then swept her into a spirited reel that left her breathless and grinning. True to his word, they danced every dance, and Nora felt herself shedding the weight of scandal and heartbreak with each turn around the floor. As evening fell, Owen guided her away from the crowds toward a small hill overlooking the town, where others were gathering to watch the promised fireworks display. "Are people staring at us?" Nora asked as they spread a blanket on the grass. Owen glanced back at the townspeople. "Some." "Mrs. Caldwell looks like she swallowed a lemon, but Sheriff Taylor just tipped his hat to us. I'd call that progress." Nora laughed, settling beside him on the blanket. "You know, a month ago I thought my life was over. Dramatic, I know, but that's how it felt. And now?" "And now?" Owen prompted gently. "Now I'm thankful Walter left," she admitted. "I never would have met you otherwise." In the dimming light, Owen's expression turned serious. "Nora, there's something I need to tell you, something about why I came to Redemption Creek." A flutter of anxiety stirred in her chest. "What is it?" Owen took a deep breath. "It wasn't chance that brought me to the church that day. I knew Walter Preston not well, but enough. We crossed paths in Cheyenne last year when I was delivering cattle to the railroad." He was gambling heavily, making boasts about a wealthy merchant's daughter he was planning to marry. Nora stiffened. Me? I didn't know your name then, Owen continued, but I heard talk in town when I arrived about the wedding scheduled that day. When I asked who was getting married and heard Preston's name, he shook his head. I had a bad feeling. The man I met wasn't the marrying kind, or at least not the faithful kind. So you came to the church to what warn me? Nora asked, trying to process this revelation. Honestly, I don't know what I intended. Maybe just to see if you seemed happy if I was wrong about him, but then I found you alone, crying, and… Owen met her eyes directly. I've never believed in fate, Nora, but finding you that day changed something in me. The first firework exploded overhead, casting multicolored light across Owen's earnest face. Nora sat perfectly still, her mind racing. Are you angry? He asked quietly. No, she said slowly. I'm grateful. You're the only one who came back for me that day, the only one who didn't walk away. Owen reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. I couldn't walk away. Something told me you were worth staying for. As fireworks painted the sky above them, Owen leaned in slowly, giving Nora every chance to pull away. Instead, she moved toward him, and their lips met in a gentle kiss that promised more than Walter's showy affections ever had when they parted. Owen tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I promised myself I wouldn't rush you. You've been through enough. I appreciate that, Nora said. But I also know my own mind, Owen Bailey, and my heart. The summer passed in a golden haze of stolen moments and growing affection. Owen proved himself to be everything Walter was not: reliable, honest, and genuinely interested in Nora's thoughts and dreams. He encouraged her to take a more active role in the family business, recognizing her head for figures and organization. When she suggested expanding the store's inventory to include more books and educational materials for the growing town, he helped her draft a proposal that even her skeptical father approved. By August, Owen had been invited to Sunday dinners at the Blackburn home, a clear sign of her parents' acceptance. Even Mrs. Blackburn had come around, especially after learning that Owen had been setting aside money for years and owned a small but promising parcel of land outside town. He's not what I imagined for you, her mother admitted one evening as they washed dishes together. But he treats you well, and that counts for more than I once thought. September brought cooler weather and a proposal. Owen took Nora riding to his land, 20 acres with a small cabin he'd been improving on his days off. Wild sunflowers nodded in the prairie wind as he helped her down from her horse and led her to a small rise overlooking a winding creek. I've been thinking about what to call this place, he said, his arm around her waist. Thought maybe you might have some ideas. Nora gazed at the rolling land, the distant mountains, the cottonwoods lining the creek. It's beautiful, Owen, so peaceful. It could be a good life here, he said carefully. Hard work, but good. The cabin needs expanding, of course, more rooms for a family eventually. Nora turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. Owen Bailey, are you asking me something? With a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, Owen dropped to one knee. Nora Blackburn, I came to Redemption Creek looking for work and found the other half of my soul instead. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? From his pocket, he produced a simple gold band set with a small pearl. It's not fancy, it's perfect, Nora interrupted, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. And yes, Owen, 1,000 times yes. They were married on a crisp October morning in the same church where Nora had been abandoned months earlier. But this time, the pews were filled with well-wishers, Owen's fellow ranch hands, the Blackburns' longtime customers, and even a few of the town gossips who had come around to supporting the match. When Nora walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes never left Owen's. His expression, wonder mixed with absolute certainty, banished the last lingering ghost of her previous heartbreak. Dearly beloved, the pastor began, the same elderly man who had witnessed Nora's tears months ago. Now his face shone with genuine pleasure as he looked between the bride and groom. Owen took Nora's hands in his voice steady and sure as he recited his vows. "I promise to stand beside you in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want. I will never leave you to face this world alone." As Nora repeated her own vows, she realized the gift she had been given, not just Owen's love, but the chance to begin again, stronger and wiser than before. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss held all the promise of their future together. At the small reception at the Blackburn home, Owen pulled Nora aside for a moment of privacy in the garden. "Happy, Mrs. Bailey?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Though I keep thinking about how differently everything might have turned out if you hadn't come to the church that day. I believe we would have found each other somehow," Owen said, brushing his lips against her forehead. "Some things are just meant to be." As the afternoon faded into evening, the newlyweds said their goodbyes and rode together to their cabin, now transformed into a cozy home with Owen's careful craftsmanship and furnishings that had been Nora's family's wedding gift. On the porch, Owen swept Nora into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, my love." Later, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, watching moonlight filter through the curtains, Nora thought about the journey that had brought them together, heartbreak transformed into joy, abandonment into the deepest commitment. "What are you thinking?" Owen murmured against her hair. "That sometimes the end of one dream makes room for a better one," she replied, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "And that I'm grateful every day for the cowboy who promised never to leave." Spring came to their homestead, bringing new calves to the small herd Owen had started, wildflowers to the prairie, and news that made their happiness complete: a baby would join their family by winter. As Nora's body changed with the miracle growing inside her, Owen's devotion only deepened. He built a cradle with his own hands, read aloud to both Nora and the baby each night, and started construction on an addition to their home. On a perfect May afternoon, exactly 1 year after their first walk along the creek, Owen found Nora standing in the doorway of the nursery, her hands resting on her growing belly. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her and their child. "I was thinking about how complete my life feels now," she answered, leaning back against his steady strength. "And how grateful I am that you came looking for me that day." "Best decision I ever made," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "Promises are sacred things, Nora Bailey. And I meant every word. I'll never leave you to face this world alone." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in colors no poet could adequately describe, Nora knew with absolute certainty that the tears she had shed in an empty church had led her to the truest love she could have imagined, a love built on respect, partnership, and the unwavering promise of a good man's heart.